Under the blistering Afghan sun, the horizon shimmered as if on fire, and the dirt beneath their boots felt like smoldering coals. The battalion had been ordered to hold position despite intelligence that enemy forces were converging from three sides. There were 480 Marines dug in, exhausted and outnumbered, their ammunition dwindling like the last grains of sand in an hourglass. Somewhere beyond the hills, insurgent mortars were being calibrated, their distant thumps growing closer, more deliberate. The commanding officer had gone silent on the radio, not because he was dead, but because command had given him the order no soldier wanted to hear: stand down and wait for extraction. Reinforcements were not coming. It was a death sentence wrapped in protocol. Lena Torres was lying prone on a crumbling ridge, her rifle cradled like an extension of her own body. Sweat streaked the dirt on her face, and blood still oozed slowly from a shrapnel cut on her forearm. She was the sniper no one noticed, until the enemy started falling, the quiet guardian perched above her brothers and sisters in the valley below. Through her scope, she could see the first wave of insurgents slipping into position, black scarves fluttering like flags of execution. Her jaw tightened. Command had told her to hold fire. She did not move, not yet, not until the last possible second. The battalion below was preparing for death with grim resignation, soldiers writing quick notes on scraps of paper, tucking them into body armor where they might be found. The smell of burned oil and sweat mingled with the metallic tang of fear. Lena's backstory was carved into her like shrapnel scars, each memory jagged and unhealed. She had grown up in the borderlands of New Mexico, in a house where gun oil was a more common smell than perfume. Her father had been a Marine too, a quiet man who taught her to shoot before she was tall enough to see over the fence line. He had died overseas when she was 17, leaving her with a folded flag, and a mother who never recovered. Enlisting had been the only thing that made sense, the only way to keep his ghost close. She had become a sniper not because she loved killing, but because she loved protecting. Every pull of the trigger felt like she was keeping someone else's daughter from growing up without a father. That was why she stayed calm even now, with death drawing near. The conflict gnawed at her like a starving wolf. She had orders, she had rules, but she also had a battalion of 480 Marines who would not live to see the next sunrise if she obeyed those rules. In the command post, higher-ranking officers argued over maps and strategy, their voices crackling over the radio as if distance could shield them from the reality of what was happening here. No one was looking at the soldiers who would be buried if the decision was wrong. Authority was paralyzed by hesitation, unwilling to break protocol even as lives bled away. Around Lena, the silence became unbearable. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting for her to decide whether this hill would become their grave. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She did not speak, did not argue. She simply exhaled. And then the first shot rang out, cutting through the stillness like a blade. One insurgent fell, then another. She was breaking protocol, committing career suicide with every round, but she was also shifting the balance of the battlefield. The Marines below noticed. Heads lifted, eyes sharpened. The hopeless stillness cracked. Replaced by movement, by survival, she became a ghost on the ridge, repositioning between shots, never staying in one place long enough for the enemy to fix her position. Tension built like a storm. The insurgents, thinking they had cornered prey, found themselves stalked by an unseen predator. The Marines below began to push back, emboldened by her defiance. By the time the enemy mortars began to fire, they were already falling back in disarray, their formations broken by precision kills they never saw coming. Every shot Lena fired was a refusal to let them die quietly. She felt her father's presence at her shoulder, as if guiding her hands. Her calm was unshakable, her breathing slow even as bullets snapped overhead. Hours later, when the dust settled and the last shots faded into silence, nearly every Marine was still alive. The insurgents had retreated, leaving behind weapons, vehicles, and their dead. Extraction arrived late. Too late to claim credit for the survival of the battalion. When Lena was finally pulled from the ridge, Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes were steady. Command tried to reprimand her at first, citing disobedience, breach of engagement rules. But then the testimonies began. One by one, the Marines she had saved stood before the tribunal. They did not shout, they did not argue. They simply stood in their dress blues and said what needed to be said, that she had saved them, that she had given them a chance to come home. The power shifted quietly, but completely. There was no need for her to defend herself. Her silence was the sharpest argument of all. By the time the hearing ended, the officers who had been ready to end her career stood and saluted her instead. What had begun as an act of defiance became a symbol of unshakable honor. Her commanding officer's final words to her were simple, heavy with meaning. She had done what was right, not what was easy. When she returned stateside months later, there were no parades, no cameras, just a quiet gathering of Marines who owed their lives to a woman who had refused to stay silent while they were left for dead. As she walked across the base, they stood at attention, row by row, a corridor of silent respect. No one spoke, and no one needed to. She had broken protocol, yes, but she had also proven that sometimes following the rulebook meant losing your soul. Some battles are fought in silence, without fanfare, without medals. They are fought on ridges under blistering suns, with a single finger on a trigger and a decision that will haunt or save hundreds. Lena's story reminds anyone listening that there are moments when rules must bend to humanity, when doing nothing is the worst kind of obedience. If you were watching, you could feel it in your chest. The weight of her choice, the cost of her courage. If you're hearing this now, share where you are. Tell someone what you think about it. And remember that somewhere out there, another quiet guardian is watching over those who cannot afford to be forgotten.